What's up, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Falcons Final Whistle podcast presented by Zaxby's. I'm Scott Bair, staring at a Zoom screen at Terrin Waack, and we are, full disclosure, we're going to pull back the curtain. Terrin and I are recording this at, I joke you not, 2:42 in the morning. Yeah, there was a bit of a, what do you want to call it, Terrin, a travel delay? There was a mechanical issue that kept us in the Jets visitors locker room far longer than we had ever had planned.
I'm just glad it didn't smell.
Yes, at least that had gone, but it was kind of a cool experience. It was players, coaches, staffers, all waiting around to get on a bus to be able to go to Newark and get on a new plane and finally fly home. Well, we are here, but just because of a travel delay does not mean that we're going to shirk our responsibilities and get this Falcons Final Whistle podcast done after, I swear this is not a NL Central baseball score, after a Falcons 13-8 victory over the New York Jets at MetLife Stadium. Falcons are back to 500. They found a way to win a rain-soaked, dreary affair full of offensive struggles and penalties and so many punts. And ultimately found a way to win. And with that victory combined with a Saints loss, the Falcons are now sitting in sole possession of first place in the NFC South. They have a game on Tampa. They have a game on New Orleans, and they've already won a game against both of those teams. All those things are positives. The Falcons also won their second straight. They won back-to-back games for the second time this season. And they're going to try to make it 3 against Tampa coming up at Mercedes-Benz next week. Before we get to all that.
This week.
Because it is that's right.
2:44 a.m. on Monday.
That is very true. Terrin, what was your takeaway from kind of a sloppy game all around? Not just from the Falcons, because they played some great defense. They did a lot of good things on special teams, but not a lot of offense to show for those 4 quarters of football.
Right. It just felt like a slog fest. I know Tori McElhaney, who is still in New Jersey. That is why she is not with us here right now. It was just a slog fest. She used that term in her story, and I would have to agree. I just remember sitting there being like, what is going on? Like, do something. Like, granted, they did the most possibly that they could given the circumstances, considering it was raining the entire time, and it was just like, it was gross out. It was not a pleasant time. Like, kudos to the fans who stuck through all 4 quarters, because there was still a pretty good turnout, I'd say, for like those conditions. I would have been happily at home on a couch with, like, we'll say, a hot chocolate in hand, had that been my situation. But yeah, it just didn't seem like one thing stood out. I guess, like, maybe that's because of the weather and they did what they could, but even Desmond Ridder said afterward, like, we can't blame anything on the weather. And I think with recency bias, it's just like the 4th quarter stands out most to me, where quite literally neither team scored. And it was punt, 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 punt. Oh, fumble, punt. Turnover on downs, punt. And I was just like, okay, this game needed to end at the end of the 3rd quarter.
Yeah, I mean, but the game still stuck around for more than 3 hours. And I think, of course, I'm flipping back and forth between the box score, and we're just talking about accepted penalties. Accepted penalties, there were 17, 11 on the Jets.
Oh my gosh.
And that makes for a longer game. But again, you coming out of a game that's 13-8, a game where you don't play your best, when you come out of that with a victory, that's a plus. That's a positive as we head down the stretch. I keep throwing out this 9-8 record that I think is good enough to win the NFC South at this point. And I think I feel more conviction in that, considering that the Saints and the Bucks are both at 5-7. They don't have a lot of wiggle room anymore. And if the Falcons can come out and win the next couple, that's going to be a real positive. So look, offensively, it seemed very clear to me that the New York Jets were saying, you're going to have to beat us through the air, and you're going to have to beat us without Drake London, because they were covering Drake London at every turn, devoting lots of attention to him. They also seemed committed to not let Bijan Robinson beat them. 18 carries for 53 yards. That's a 2.9 yards per carry average, and he had a 12-yard run in there. Ultimately, they weren't able to run consistently. I'm, of course, going back. The Falcons averaged 3.0 yards per play over 64 plays and won. Because frankly, they did just enough. And Arthur Smith kind of mentioned in his press conference at the end where he kind of said, look, you may have thought some of those things were conservative, but and the way that he was calling the plays, the way he was seemingly willing to just punt the ball back and try to win a game of field position. I don't think that the Falcons believed the Jets could drive the length of the field on them with the way their defense was playing and with the way that the Jets offense was playing. That was a good bet. And ultimately, come out with a win, no matter how you got to do it.
Well, that's what everyone kept saying. A win is a win. A win is a win. And I agree. I mean, it was interesting while we were waiting for forever for those elevators at the end of the game. You could hear the Jets writers talking about, like, that was a classic Jets game. Like, the defense drags the opponent through the mud, but the offense doesn't do anything. So that's why the Jets still lose. I mean, they brought in a second quarterback that he became, you and I looked at this, the fifth quarterback making his season debut. Is that the word I want? Just like his first appearance for this team this season. Yeah. Fifth one. Trevor Simeon.
Yeah. I mean, it pretty incredible to see that many kind of quarterbacks making their debut that season for the team. Ultimately, Trevor Simeon came in and he played the fourth quarter. He put the ball on the ground 3 times. And as this game wore on, we've been talking about, look, it was sloppy. It wasn't a lot of good offense. I think,
but no turnovers.
And one, I think that's huge, because against an offense like the Jets, you can't give them any freebies. You can't give them like a 30-yard field to score a touchdown. You got to make them go the length of the field. They did that. The ball hit the ground 3 times, once on a Cordero Patterson fumble, the botch snap at the first offensive snap of the game, and then a muff punt by D. Alford. But the Falcons recovered all 3. They forced 3 turnovers. They were very active getting after the quarterback. Jessie Bates comes through again. And I think that can lead us to what was another really positive and successful outing for this defense that had kind of hit the skids a little bit during that 3-game losing streak, but it seems to have really found its footing lately.
I mean, it's been 9 quarters since they allowed a touchdown, and that's the longest active streak in the NFL right now. Baltimore had it earlier this season, but it's not active right now. So they get one more quarter in there. They've got the longest streak this season, knock on wood, I guess. But yeah, the defense showed up. And Jessie Bates, I mean, how often are we going to talk about this man?
I mean, he's so good at reading quarterbacks, right? I thought that was, and in a story that will be out probably by the time that you read this, Falcons takeoff. Listen to this. It's late, y'all. Listen to this. Terrin, you found a really good quote from Tim Boyle about Jessie Bates and about that interception, which will appear in Falcons takeoff Monday morning.
Yes, but we can give a little sneak peek because the people are listening. He said number 3 all week has been a conversation point of just making sure you track where he's at. He's big off the quarterback's eyes. And that's what you were just saying, that he watches the quarterback so well.
And ultimately, I mean, Tim Boyle then goes on to say he's not upset with his decision. He was upset with the path of the ball. I mean, come on, dude.
That's what I was going to leave for the readers.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if I buy that one necessarily, but what I do buy is that Jessie Bates it's his 5th interception thus far, back-to-back games.
High.
Yeah, back-to-back games with a pick. And we've said this before, and the compliments are true, that he's worth the money that you're investing. but the guy just continues to show up in a way that is really impressive, because at the time that he did it, the Falcons were operating without AJ Terrell, who was out with a concussion. I'm not sure if Nate Landman had gotten hurt yet, but they were down some key pieces. And then sure enough, Jessie Bates comes through with another big pick. And, that was huge. I think their only touchdown that was scored, which was Desmond Ridder, didn't have a lot of great throws, but his throw to Michael Pruitt, kind of throwing him open. I guess he was already open, but I mean, it was pristine. Michael Pruitt comes through yet again in the end zone and scores that key touchdown. It was in the second quarter. Yep. And they got the ball off a turnover and turned that into points. That's something the Falcons weren't doing a lot earlier on. It's something that they did twice against New Orleans and did again in a big spot here against the Jets, is taking those defensive takeaways and turning it into something else. Now, somebody else I do want to bring up here is Bud Dupree. 2 sacks. You could argue that I think Bud wants a third one, a forced fumble, 7 total tackles. That's what this defensive front needs, right? It needs a guy like that to give a dominant performance like that. I thought that was a really encouraging stat line for Bud.
Yeah, and there's other people stepping up. We've talked about how the defense took a major hit when Grady Jarrett got hurt, but now you saw David Onyemata really stepping up. Now you have Bud Dupree doing it. Arnold Ebiketie it's like sneaky sacking.
He is.
I don't know, sneaky sacks. I don't know. Something like that. He just ends up sacking the quarterback sneakily. But it's just they're kind of the next man up mentality. Everything is just blurring together. But the next man up mentality, which is just such a team thing to say, but it's true in this case because we've said it once, we've said it before, we'll say it again if that's how that phrase goes. But Grady Jarrett was such a key piece, and without him, it's a loss. But people are trying to fill that void.
Yeah, and I think the Falcons have been relatively lucky when it comes to injuries, but they finished that game with Andre Smith at linebacker, with Trey Flowers in for Jeff Okudah, who slipped on the MetLife Stadium turf late. AJ Terrell, and you had Clark Phillips, the third over there. Caleb McGarry was lost to a knee injury early and didn't come back, and Storm Norton played there. You got contributions from a lot of different dudes, and especially if you look at those cornerbacks, look, on the first play that Clark Phillips came in for AJ, they put Garrett Wilson on that side. Coincidence? I think not. And he continued to hold up at a position where if you make one bad move, it's that explosive play that could have really, really hurt the Falcons in a game like this. And they didn't allow that. I think that those moments are key. These contributions of coming from everywhere are important. And I think that when you look at what this win is, right, it wasn't even really like a fun game to watch. It wasn't entertaining in a way that NFL football normally is, but I thought it was impressive because of those contributions, because they stood tall. And I think that, look, the Jets are in a tailspin at this point, using the Jet reference. But I really do think, though, that this can be a confidence booster that, hey, we went through a lot. We faced some adversity. I actually talked to Storm Norton, and he actually said that when it's crunch time at the end of the year, facing adversity like this and finding a way to win can help you because you become more battle tested. And that when you face adversity again down the road, you are confident that, look, we're not playing our best. We just lost some key pieces, but we're going to keep fighting and find a way to get this thing done ultimately. Kind of an unsung MVP here is Bradley Pinion, right? He had
9 punts.
9 punts.
That ties his single season career high. He's never cracked double digits, but it's getting close.
And I think he had 4 inside the 20-yard line. Mm-hmm. That's big. Again, in a game of field position, in a game where you just never really felt like the Jets were going to drive the length of the field. Something that I think is important here. And obviously when you have quarterback problems, you're going to key against the run. But Breece Hall had 13 carries for 16 yards, 1.2 yards per carry. The run defense gave up more than 5 yards per carry against the Saints. I thought that was a really important thing for that front to be able to hold up like that.
When I was looking at the stat book while writing Falcons Takeoff, I saw that and I was very surprised. But then I was thinking about it. I was like, I never really did. Like, we heard his name, but it was never in a standout way.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that was big because then it puts more on the quarterback. Something else that I'm cruising through Tori McElhaney's story. She really focused on the defense, and she had Calais Campbell quoted in here, or at least discussing it, basically saying that one change that came after the bye was that the Falcons have decided to keep more linemen on the field in passing down situations. A slight change, I'm reading her story now, a slight change that has affected sack totals in the last 2 weeks with increases in quarterback hits and tackles for losses. I think that those things are all positives as we kind of look at, because look, it wasn't a full-scale staffing change that came out of the bye. It was kind of subtle tweaks where you're, quarter turn of a screw here and there. And I think that we are starting to see little improvements there as they've won their second straight game. Look, I mean, at one, it's, 242. Two, so we're not going to keep you very long. But also, look, there just were not a lot of highlights to talk about in this game. So let's expand it a little bit and say context of the NFC South. The Saints were down 21-0 to Detroit in the first 8 minutes or 7 minutes of that game. And
yeah, but they made it a game.
And they most certainly did. So you had that development, and Tampa Bay beat Carolina. So both of those teams sit at 5-7, the glorious second place 5-7 record here. And
Panthers are officially eliminated too, right?
They are the first team to be mathematically eliminated. They're not in a great space right now with recently fired Frank Brock. Yeah, Bryce Young really struggling. And ultimately, when you look at the importance of this win within the context of what else happened within the division, knowing that you have 2 NFC South games back-to-back coming up, this was a big one. And I think the Falcons can, if they can do well over the next couple of games, they can really assert some dominance within this division.
No, I agree. And yes, the Falcons beat the Bucs earlier this year with a ripe score of 16-13. So they won it with a last-minute field goal. I think if they're able to put up a more dominating win, that'll speak volumes too. And I think will give them confidence because they squeaked that one out. Like, yes, like we said, a win is a win. But given how the NFC South stands, they beat the Saints by 2 scores. I think if they do the same-ish or in that realm where it's not just the last-minute Young Waiku coming and save the day, I think that'll be huge because at this rate, they could go undefeated in the NFC South.
Yeah.
Which is wild because then you think about their record and you're like, oh.
Yeah, and they went through a real rough patch there, and they lost some. I mean, not like wild card really matters within the context of how the NFC looks right now, but they lost a bunch of games that they felt like they should have that they should have won. I'll go back to that Caden Ellis quote from last week after the Saints game, is that those 3 games that they lost, they expected to and believed that they should have won all 3 of those games. They ended up losing all 3. They thought they were going to go on a run after the Tampa Bay victory. They went on a skid, and ultimately this is the Falcons working their way back out of it. And if they're going to get 3 more wins in the next 5 and end up sitting at 9-8, that I think that you're going to have to play a little bit better on offense. It's also the going into this Jets game, the Falcons had the easiest remaining strength of schedule. And if you look at the graph, it's the Saints and the Falcons are essentially outliers in terms of who they've got left to play. And that's based on the current records. Now they've got 3 more games in the NFC South. They play the Bears that have struggled to win, and they're playing the Indianapolis Colts, which are, kind of up and down. So ultimately, I think this division is there for the taking, which is crazy because we're still talking about a 6-6 team. But ultimately, this is one of those situations where you're not going to give it back, right? Like you're not going to, feel bad because there's a team with a better record that may not make the playoffs. Like these are the rules, and the Falcons have to take advantage of it. I think with the way the rest of the division is playing right now, not saying that there isn't talent, not saying the Falcons are going to go unbeaten in the NFC South, but I just think that if they can figure out this passing game, right, it doesn't have to be the second coming of the early 2000s Rams. It doesn't have to be greatest show on turf. They just have to have an ability to come up with a big play when they need it and play off of their run game and do those other types of things. If they can do that, I think this team can compete with just about anybody as long as this defense keeps, playing that way.
Bold statement. Anybody?
Yeah. Okay. Almost anybody. Almost anybody. I think there's certain teams that aren't really good matchups, but nonetheless, this is the type of progress that you need to see. I know I feel like I'm droning on and on here, but you can keep going back to that Arthur Blank 3rd year of a 3-year plan thing, right? That this is the time the Falcons were supposed to take a step in the win column. They're 1 win away from matching their season total from 21 and 22. It's time to exceed that, and it's time to finish on a strong note.
I think this next game, even with how the division stands, has a lot of weight on it because it would put them above 500 again. It would be the first time this season they've had 3 wins in a row. And like you said, it would match that win total. I didn't even realize that in the moment, but it's just like 3 huge trigger buttons, pressure points. I don't know, whatever phrase you want to put in there, but it's just like, it doesn't even matter that it's necessarily the Buccaneers. I think it was just this next one in general to get 3 in a row. Even Desmond said it in his post-game press conference. Like, we haven't been able to stack 3 wins in a row. Yeah. Now's the time.
Now is the time to finish strong. Bud was saying after the game that, look, that at the end of the year, the teams that can surge and make the playoffs or achieve their goals are teams with the arrow pointing up. Sometimes you can stack wins early, but the arrow's pointing down at the wrong time. You want to be peaking at the right time. He feels like that arrow is pointed up and they have to keep it pointing up. They have to keep growing and expanding and gaining confidence and doing all those other types of things. I do agree with you. It's a home game. I think it would be monumental for them to win 3 in a row. It's another one of those psychological hurdles. And if they can do all that, they could be in good shape. But as we've seen before with inconsistency, now they have to go prove it. Right. Well, it's officially 305, Terrin. I think
Mr. 305.
Mr. 305. So I think, wait, is that a Pitbull reference?
That's a Pitbull reference, yes.
I knew it. Most people don't know Terrin is super into Pitbull.
Number 1 fan.
Fact. And we're going to be back with another breakdown of next week's game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and more fun facts about Terrin's musical preferences on the next episode of the Falcons Final Whistle podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Atlanta Falcons Podcast Network. And we will be back with you, plus Tori McElhaney. Next.
And not at 3 a.m.
And not at 3 a.m. Under no circumstances. This is a one-time thing.
I refuse.
This is a one-time thing. For Terrin, I'm Scott. See you later.